Okay, in this series of videos, we're going to take a look at the market determinants of value, Chapter 5 in the Ling and Archer book. So one kind of overarching idea in this chapter is kind of the nature of cities, kind of how they formed, why they formed, what's the purpose of cities. But really more important than that is the notion of being able to estimate future cash flows based on what's going on in the city. So we're going to ask a few different questions whenever we're looking at the market, looking at cities, looking at what's going on in an area. And those questions are listed here. First things we're going to ask is the city growing or thriving? Or on the other hand, is it shrinking or declining? So we can look at things like population growth, job growth in the area, and get a sense of what's going on in the city. Hopefully it's obvious, but from an investment standpoint, you really want to be in a city that has positive things going on. There's momentum, there's job growth, there's population growth. People desire to live there. They're not flocking away in droves. So we want to be in an area that's desirable. Related question is the area of the city that we're looking at, is that growing or thriving? Or has it kind of gone into decline and the growth and the money and the activity is elsewhere in the city? So not only is it thinking about the city at large, that do you want to be in the city, but also where in the city, where is activity going on, where's maybe even the next activity going on. Perhaps it is a sense of, this area is kind of run down, but there's starting to be some activity here, and there may be some good opportunities for redevelopment. Where's the direction of city growth is a related question. Is the city kind of moving south and east as it gets more people coming, or is it moving to the west? You want to be ideally in kind of in front of that. That's where the land is going to be. There's going to be cheaper opportunities, cheaper land, and then as things kind of catch up to you, the real estate values will go up. How does this property fit into its submarket and the surrounding properties? So this is just thinking about what properties are around there, what linkages do we have, where can my customers also shop, or what's my, and this is the last question, what are my customers coming from? What do they want out of this property? What would be a good use of this property? So all of these questions are kind of related to this chapter. This chapter, again, is really, in a lot of ways, an urban economics kind of a chapter, describing how cities come about, why cities look the way they do. But as we're thinking about all those interesting notions, it's important to keep in mind these things, that we really care about the value of the real estate in the city and what's driving the value. So to get a better sense of these questions and getting an answer for these questions, we're going to think about the nature of cities. And we're going to just look at a few of these items here. Cities, in a fundamental sense, are really about economic activities that bring people together so they can do those economic activities easier, more efficiently. Some key drivers for cities, for their locations, for kind of the way they arrange themselves. A big one is transportation. Cities are frequently located near major crossroads or places where there's easy access to transportation, and especially different modes of transportation. The oldest cities are going to be near coastlines and rivers, but now we would also think about cities being located near interstate highways and railroad, airports, transportation, all those sorts of things. So these are going to really impact the economic activity of the city. Another important notion is the idea of an economic base. So what economic activity drives the city? What do people want to come to the city for? What do they want to buy from that city? That's going to help determine the future prospects of the city. The city's economic base is going to could have a low or a high economic multiplier depending on what that economic base is. And a high economic multiplier means that activity is going to bring in lots of other ancillary activities, lots of supporting businesses, and it's going to help an economy thrive. So different examples of economic bases that kind of drive a city. So high tech would be a big one. Those are kind of easy to think about. You'd have examples like Silicon Valley. Boston is a big one. Austin, many parts in Colorado, Boulder and Fort Collins are kind of a high tech area. Seattle in Washington. So high tech kind of drives that economic activity, or it's a big driver of it. Things like education hubs, so university towns, again Colorado, Fort Collins in particular, Education is a big draw and a big component to this city's economy. Boston is a huge university town. Things like entertainment. You'd have Hollywood as kind of the entertainment capital of the U.S. New York is a close second. And then there's even places where movies are starting to be made, like Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia. A lot of production companies are located down there, so that can be a big part of the draw to a city. Manufacturing. In the old days, we'd had a lot of manufacturing going on in the Midwest and Ohio. Cars in Michigan, Detroit was a big manufacturing hub for cars. That's obviously kind of declined over time. Resources. Things like oil. Texas was a big oil place. Natural gas. A variety of places have kind of played into the boom in natural gas. North Dakota had a very booming economy based on the natural gas and some fracking. It remains to be seen whether that's going to be a lasting effect. But and then things like coal. So you'd have maybe in the east, West Virginia, you have cities and towns that are doing well because of their proximity to coal, but now that's in decline, and that's going to really hurt the city. And then another example of an economic base would be something like a retirement destination. And you think here of Florida and Arizona, where there's an attractive climate, but anyway, retirement destinations where older people go, and there's a higher quality of life for them there. So these are among many different kinds of economic bases, economic activities that would drive an area. And depending on where you are, where you're investing, you want to understand what those economic bases are, and that may dictate the types of real estate you invest in, the uses that you consider. So for instance, if you're wanting to invest in Florida, you may be thinking that you're going to have a disproportionate number of senior citizens, and you want to think about that in the design, in the use of your real estate. And then a follow-on notion is this idea of the local economic activities. These are the activities that kind of support and sustain a city. So the base activities are what draws others to the area, but these local economic activities kind of support everything that's going on in the city. So the retail, the grocery stores, the government offices, the medical offices, the doctor's offices, dentists, etc., the restaurants. So all of these things are needed to kind of sustain and support a city, but it's the economic base that kind of brings people to the city and draws outsiders in. No one moves to a city for their grocery stores, but you might move to a city for the good job that you have in high tech or entertainment or education. Some other big considerations that we'd think about are the nature of the labor force. So again, this is a big driver of the economic activity, the economic development of a city. What kind of firms would want to locate there? This is one of the biggest questions whenever corporations think about relocation. We just went through the Amazon HQ2 process, and one of their biggest criteria is going to be the nature of the labor force. How big, how educated, what's kind of the demographics of that labor force. Another important consideration is the quality of life. So how's the infrastructure? Are the roads good? Are the schools good? What do the tax situation look like? This would be one of those considerations that kind of tend to push people out of the Northeast, for instance, and further towards the South. You have things like the quality of life. The taxes are higher in the Northeast, typically lower in the South. So the cost of doing business, the cost of living is lower as you kind of move in the southerly direction. Some other things would be industry economies of scale. So there might be very good reasons to locate in a particular area to take advantage of the knowledge and the resources that have already kind of located there. So a great example would be Silicon Valley. It's a magnet for anything that's high tech, anything that's innovative. There's kind of a culture that's been built there, a lot of skilled engineers, etc., that are located there. And then finally, another thing to think about is an agglomeration economy. So this is really a kind of a synonym for a city that's big enough to have a wide array of services, opportunities, employment. It's a large city. It's got its own self-sustaining critical mass, and it's just going to draw people because there's a widely diversified economy. There's a lot of people there, a lot of things going on. So places like New York, Chicago, LA, these are agglomeration economies where it's not just one thing that's driving it, but you have a lot of different businesses, a lot of different things going on. I'm going to go ahead and stop here for the first video, and we'll pick up in the next video. We're taking a look at the shape of the city.